Welcome to your first video for Number Sense 2, Module 2, Media Lesson 2B, Ordering and Rounding Decimals. In this first example, we're going to use the idea of the 10 by 10 grid that we learned in Media Lesson 2A to order decimals. So remember, to order decimals or order numbers means to write them from least to greatest. Use the decimals given below to answer the following questions. So we're given these decimals, and part A asks, determine how many orange strips and yellow squares you would use to draw the number on the 10 by 10 grid of 100 squares. Use the maximum number of orange strips possible before you use yellow squares. So we have a grid here, and we're not going to shade these all in, but we're just going to have it ready in order to reference it. So our first decimal number is 0.7, which is 7/10. So 7/10 is 7 orange strips. So we'd shade in 7 columns and 0 yellow squares. 0.27 or 27/100 is 2/10 or 2 orange strips and 7 yellow squares. Continuing, 0.38 is 38/100 or 3/10 and 8 yellow squares. 0.3 is 3/10, which is 3 orange strips and 0 yellow squares. And I think you're probably getting the gist. 8 orange strips, 0 yellow squares, and 7 orange strips and 2 yellow squares. Now we're going to use this table to order the decimals from least to greatest. So here's the table right here. So one way we can think about this that's useful for putting it in this table is if we look at these numbers, remember 7 orange strips and 0 yellow squares is 70 yellow squares. So if we read this all the way to the number of yellow squares, then we'd have the same unit fraction, hundredths. So this is 70/100, 27/100, 38/100, and once they're all the same size, then we can just order them like we would order whole numbers. So looking down the orange strip column, I notice that the smallest number of orange strips is 2. So this is going to be our smallest number, 0.27. Then I'll put a comma. So we've taken care of this one. Now let's look at the next set. And I said set because we're going to look at numbers that have 3 in the orange strip column. So let's highlight those a different color. So 3 and 3, these are the next 2 in our list. They're smaller than the others because these have 7 and 8 orange strips. But since these two numbers are identical, we need to compare the number of yellow squares. Well, this one has 0 yellow squares and this one has 8. So 0.30, or as it was written here, just 0.3 is the next number. Then we have 0.38. Okay. So notice sometimes people look at that 8 in the hundredths place and they say, oh, this is smaller because it goes out to the hundredths place, whereas this one doesn't. But notice you really need to think of there being a placeholder there in the hundredths place with a 0, and then this is smaller than 8. So now we've done these. Okay, so notice this is what I'd call an iterative process. We're not comparing all 5 numbers at once, and we're not comparing each pair to each other. We're starting from the smallest and going up to the largest, or you could start with the largest and go to the smallest. So now in the orange strip category, we have 7s and 8s. So the next largest is 7s. Okay. And we have 7, 0, and 7, 2. So comparing the hundredths, this 0.7 is smaller. Okay, and actually it didn't put a hundredths place there. So I'll just write 0.7 and 0.72. Now we've used those. And finally, we have 0.80 is our largest number. So this is this set of numbers listed from least to greatest. So describe in words the strategy you use to order numbers. So let's try to put into words what we did here. So we place the numbers in a chart with the same number of decimal places. And by that, so I'm going to write meaning, we added zeros as placeholders. Okay, so when we had just one digit, like 7, we put a 0 in the placeholder. That was the first thing we did. Then we looked at the largest place value So in this case, the largest place value was the number of orange strips. And found the smallest number. And for part 3, we continued this process until all the numbers were ordered. Okay, so in some cases, we compared the largest place value and then we had to look at the next largest place value. So I didn't write all that information in here, but this was our general strategy.